I'm not a lawyer, but this is part 4 of Georgia versus Quaneesha Johnson, the sentencing. So this morning, Quaneesha was sentenced. But before we get into the actual sentencing, here's a quick clip of what the judge said before giving the sentence.
And even though the jury did not hear the 911 tape of the previous domestic violence incident between Mr. Smith and another female, the court can consider that, along with the police report and disturbing photographs of abuse to your minor child by the victim in this case. On the day of the incident, Ms. Johnson, I believe that you took all the necessary steps to ensure your safety after Mr. Smith had threatened to inflict bodily harm upon you. And it does not matter that you stayed out all night, or even if you stayed out for a week and leaving your children with whomever. That does not constitute that somebody would threaten you with serious bodily injury. Ms. Johnson, you called the alarm company, you called local law enforcement, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And when law enforcement arrived, they allowed you, the 2 people in this situation, to go into the home unescorted without any cooling off period, which resulted in the loss of Mr. DeMonte Smith and resulted in your conviction for voluntary manslaughter. So when considering the aggravating and mitigating circumstances of this case, the court is required to impose a sentence that is sufficient but not greater than necessary.
So on the biggest charge of voluntary manslaughter, the judge sentenced Quaneesha Johnson to 20 years, but this is how it breaks down. 5 years in jail, 5 years in home confinement, and then 10 years on probation. And that home confinement does have some restrictions, but basically at this point, the sentence is 5 years in jail, and then she'll be able to serve the remaining time outside of jail. All the other charges, the sentence will be run concurrently with the voluntary manslaughter charge. So what that means is there's no additional time. She will serve each charge at the same time. The other thing to note about this sentence is that the judge sentenced her under Georgia's First Offenders Act. And what that means is that if she violates any terms of this sentence, she can then be sentenced to the maximum, so like up to 20 years in jail and things like that. However, if she successfully completes the sentence that's been imposed, at the end, this conviction will not be on her record. Before the hearing was over, Quaneesha's attorney, Michael Sterling, told the judge that they plan to appeal.
And one more motion from the defense, Your Honor. We are going to move forward with an appeal in this case, so I would request at this time that Ms. Johnson be granted an appeal bond and be allowed to stay out on the current conditions, the current bond she has.
The judge granted Michael Sterling's motion. Instead of being remanded today, Quaneesha Johnson was allowed out on bond until her appeal. There are some terms she has to agree to while she's out on bond. She's on like house arrest. Her kids have to be in therapy. She can't be around convicted felons. So again, things like that. But ultimately, they're going to have another go.